Use this opportunity to focus in on the op-ed that I wrote on July 15th of this year. It's an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun papers entitled Creating a City University of Baltimore. And I wanted to focus on that in particular because I've been on a number of radio shows and in other forums where I've listened to people ask me questions about what I didn't say as opposed to what I did say. And I hope that those who are going to raise questions have actually read the op-ed or at least are willing to read it either at your phone or before we complete this discussion. Again, the date was July 15, 2019. Let me start by saying that the op-ed was written based on some testimony that I gave in a lawsuit 4 years ago. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the suit that I'm talking about. This is a so-called coalition lawsuit about the representatives of the 4 historically black colleges and universities in our state sued the state government for a variety of issues, but in particular saying that they had not remedied past discrimination. The individual universities are not parties to that lawsuit, but we are in some ways targets because part of the remedies that the coalition plaintiffs have presented to the federal court is that certain programs in traditionally white institutions, and University of Baltimore considered a traditionally white university, certain of those programs should be taken away and moved to one of the 4 HBCUs. So we were targets of the remedy, though we're not parties to the litigation. We were asked by the federal judge to come speak at a hearing regarding the remedies. And I said at that time to Judge Blake, Catherine Blake, who was the judge in the case, that I have an idea that instead of pulling apart pieces, that we could have a coalition of the universities in Baltimore. And at that time of my testimony, I talked about Morgan, Coppin, University of Baltimore, Baltimore City Community College, aligned under a structure that I had said at that time was very similar to the City University of New York. And those of you, and many of you, because I've received notes from some people, are familiar with the City University of New York. It's a coalition of about 23 or 24 institutions. Some are 4-year universities and colleges, some are 2-year, some are solely graduate centers, but in the instance of the City University of New York, those institutions are not merged with one another. They are involved in an administrative coalition, but they are not merged. So there is a John Jay College, for example, that focus on criminal justice. There's a Lehman College. There's a Medgar Evers College. There, a Baruch College, and they have their own presidents, their own faculty. But for some of the major purchases, like HR matters, information technology matters, procurement systems, they are under a coordinated body from the Chancellor's office of the City University of New York. CUNY, the shorthand for City University of New York, is also a part of SUNY, the State University System, State University of New York. So the model that I was looking at, that model as one that could be applicable here in Baltimore. So I testified to that. This was several years ago. What has happened in that lawsuit? Well, the plaintiffs in that lawsuit had about 10 different counts against the state. The federal judge ruled against them on 9 of the 10 counts. But on the one count, the federal judge did find the state to be liable, and that was in the duplication of programs that should have gone solely to the HBCUs. The court then ordered the plaintiffs and defendants to mediate, try to work things out. Let's resolve this and come back to the federal court with a plan. They failed the mediation. So everybody appealed to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. That matter went to the Fourth Circuit. There was argument back and forth on the constitutional violations. And the Fourth Circuit said, you parties ought to go back to mediation. And the mediation they wanted to be completed by April. They didn't succeed by April of this year. The court gave them an extension till July 31 of this year. I found out that the mediation was about to fail, and I did not want the Court of Appeals to impose a remedy without hearing about an alternative idea, and that is why I wrote the date of this article, which is July 15, before the July 31 deadline. So I hope that the court would actually consider what I have to say before imposing a remedy. Now, bottom line, before opening it to questions, I still believe that with all the changes going on in higher education, movement towards free community college, movement towards a lot of online programs, major changes in the way in which higher education is delivered, that an alignment involving these three institutions is in the best interest of students and the state, and will actually deliver the higher education product in a more effective and efficient quality. Others may disagree with me on that. So the bottom line to what I wrote in the op-ed was that I recognized this was a politically charged issue. I recognize that some people may view that it has implications for that coalition lawsuit. And so what I recommended, bottom line, was that the state that the state legislature create a study to look at the merits of this. I said the pros, look at the education and the economic benefits, or pros and cons of this. Education and economic merits is what I said, and then come back to do a report that would be distributed to the various constituencies of these three institutions, and then make a decision. So where I believe this matter is now is that the legislative leaders are very interested in creating a study group, and it would be very public, and would look at the merits of what I've proposed. If they decide that it makes sense to move forward, that in the legislative session of 2021, they would make a proposal for some kind of implementation in 2022. So that's where I see it now. It's just recommendations, and I'll be happy to take questions about your views on this, again, on or why it was presented. One other thing, because this has come up at the University of Baltimore, my faculty was absolutely, the majority of my faculty was opposed to what I presented. And they were opposed for a variety of reasons, but one of the things that they criticized me about was that I didn't give them a heads up about the article. Well, I was between a rock and a hard place on that one, because I wanted to get this into the Sun papers, and their view was that they wouldn't publish if I distributed it to somebody else before. And in this internet age, if I gave one member of my faculty an early copy of what I wrote, and it gets blasted out to the world.